everyone, welcome back to the REST API in-depth series. In this video, we're finally going to start with our first HTTP request method for our REST APIs, which is the GET request method. This is going to be one of like 4 or 5-ish of the main methods. So things like get, put, patch, and delete and post. I think I missed. I always mix up the orders. This is going to be the get focused video. So in this video, we're going to learn all about the get request, which frankly is probably one of the most important types of requests to understand when it comes to REST APIs, because if you can understand this idea of a GET request and the main theory and concepts behind it, it'll really actually help you understand pretty much all the types of requests, even ones that you might not have seen as much before. So I'm super excited to kind of go through a bunch of examples. We're going to see things like how to get a bunch of resources, get single resources, and even kind of do things like filtering and pagination and sorting, and how might you design an API to actually go about that. We'll even take a look at things like nested resources, and then a little bit a wrap up on around just API design in general, and how that kind of is a totally different topic, but something you can definitely spend some time thinking about to get better at designing these APIs. So let's just get right to the content. Okay, so to start, I just want to kind of give an overview of this idea of a GET request. So if you recall, on the right over here, I have not all of them, but these are the main types of requests that you're going to see when it comes to HTTP requests towards an API like a REST API especially. These are really the verbs that we're going to be looking at. So if you think of the methods, the request method type, which we saw in previous videos, GET is just one of those request method types. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to go through post, put, patch, and delete in future videos, but really we need to start with GET to understand kind of this idea at a very high level. So it is one of the HTTP verbs, or one of the methods. The whole idea behind GET is to kind of do like one of these things. We want to ask for some kind of resource that the server or the backend has. We might want to ask for multiple of that resource, or related types of resources. Now this might seem a bit vague, but we'll go into specific examples shortly together. But really, I think that's the really crux of this idea of GET request, is we're just asking for stuff. Okay, we're going to be asking for content or resources from this server, and this server has it stored somewhere. We saw a bit of different types of data storage technologies in the previous video, things like memory storage or database storage or file storage. We're going to be dealing mainly with memory and files in this series, as I talked about previously, but it really doesn't matter. The main thing is that we're going to be asking the server for some type of content and resource, and that's this idea of GET, which is the whole verb behind this method. Now, beyond this main concept, there's this idea of being able to customize our query using things like query parameters or search parameters. So we'll do a demo of that later, and I'll show you how easy it is to actually get that working, and how it kind of just flows from this idea of URL design for the GET API. But really, behind the scenes, I want you to think of this idea. You'll see this pop up quite a lot when you're working on a team, or even just if you're looking at documentation or looking at things online. There's this idea of CRUD operations. This stands for create, read, update, and delete operations. Normally, when people talk about CRUD operations, they're talking about things like a database. So we want to maybe create a new item in that database, or read from that database, read an item from that database, or update or delete an item from that database. Now, when we're talking about GET requests, you should be thinking about the R in the CRUD operation. So they're pretty synonymous with each other. We're getting, or we're reading for data or resource from this data source, in this case, a server. So we are not doing any manipulation or changing that content in any way. So we're not going to be creating new content. We're not going to be updating or deleting content. This is a kind of a harmless style of request, a harmless operation. It should not be changing really the data in any way. Now, there are some small kind of exceptions and caveats behind this, like is logging really an update and things like that. But really, at its core, a GET request is only to read data. It's not to write data. And this idea of GET requests, when it comes to an API, really has to do with this idea of the URL. So we saw kind of how a URL is broken down in previous videos together. I want you to keep that at the back of your mind when we're going through this video, because it's really important to structure this URL in a very particular way so that we can actually make use of it to send data back and forth between our API to actually know what it is that we're getting in the first place. So without further ado, let's take a look at a concrete example so this makes a little bit more sense. Okay, so over here, I have an example to get many or get all of a resource. Okay, so the idea behind this is we're going to use this verb, which is the get HTTP method verb, to request content from this URL right here. In this case, this is HTTP localhost, and it's port 8000, but then we have this /users. Now, the part that you see here highlighted on this slide in orange, as I have pointing to on the slide as well, is the resource that we're looking for. In this case, the resources, plural, that we're looking for. The kind of idea behind this is what I have down here in English. So you can read this URL structure, that both the method and this kind of structure of this URL right here, as I want to get all the users. Okay, that's how I would kind of read this right here. If I just had this URL and I knew that it was a get method, I would be like, okay, from this host I want, or from this server, please give me all the users. Okay, so down here I have an example of what that response to this request might actually look like. So you can see that this is JSON. This is an array in this case. And in this array, I have multiple bits of data. You can see they're all objects, and in those objects are properties and values. So for example, this is maybe one user in this list of users that we're asking for the get all users method. So here, maybe the user has an ID, first name, last name, email, country, and a city, and they're all filled with different types of data. Now I just used a website to generate some data here, and this is going to be in the GitHub repo for this video as well. So you can download it from there, which should be in the description below. But you can kind of see that in this case, this might be a very long kind of amount of content. For example, there might be 100 users, it might be 1,000 users, there might be 1,000,000 users, right? So generally, we'd want to add a little bit more restriction as to how kind of this operation of get all of something might work. But really, at a high level, this is really all it is. It is saying, I want to get all of this type of resource. So we're getting an array of users where each user is a single object in this case. You can't see the end of it in this JSON here, but you can imagine it's however long it needs to be. Okay. So let's start with this, and we'll actually code it out together, and then we'll move on to kind of taking this a step further and seeing how we can actually be a bit more specific with the type of content that we want, or the type of resources that we're actually asking for in our API. So I'll switch over here to my VS Code, and I have that users.json file already kind of created. So this is a JSON file. I used an online service to kind of generate a bunch of kind of key value pairs. This is a bunch of IDs, first name, last name, emails, countries, and cities, just randomly generated. I think there's like 100 of them here. So if I scroll down to the very bottom, you'll see that there's like about 100 in here. Now do all the names and cities and everything, and emails make perfect sense. Not always, but they're pretty decent. They're good enough for what we need. We can imagine that this would simulate kind of like a realistic data set. Of course, in real life, your data set might be a bit larger. However, fundamentally, most of the premise should still be there. So this is going to be in the GitHub repo. Feel free to download that. I just wanted to give you a heads up as to where this file came from. Now, I'm going to create a new Deno project. So I'm going to do Control or Command Shift P, and I'll type Deno, and I'll do Deno initialize workspace configuration. I want to enable linting, yes, and I don't want the unstable API, so I'll press no for that one. Then I'll create my VS Code settings JSON there and see that Deno has been initialized in this workspace. I'll create a new file here. I'll just create this. I'll do a get all .ts. And this is my TypeScript file for my Deno project here. So I'll create an async function. I'll call this my handler. And in here, I'll have my REQ, which is typed request. And we're going to return a response. Now, what I'm going to do here is by default, I'm going to return a response with no data in it. So I'm just going to put null. And I'm going to give it a status of 404, just like that. So this is, I think I put a new response here. I was confused as to why it was being underlined. Thank you, Deno. So this is a response with no actual data in the body, not even just an empty string, and a status code of 404, which is not found. Then I'm going to say deno.serve. I'm going to pass it my handler, and that'll give it the default port to actually get that up, which should be 8000, I believe. And we can actually check to see that we basically get back our 404 here. So I'll open up my terminal over here on my right hand side, make sure I'm in the right folder there, and I am, and I'll do Deno run. I'll run it in watch mode just so that I don't have to keep restarting my server here. I'll do -- watch, and I'll do -- allow -net. Now we are going to be reading some data here. So I'll do -- allow -read. So I can read this JSON file in a second. And I'll do get all .ts. I think that should be enough. We're not going to be writing in this case. We're just going to be getting data. So those should be the permissions that we need. Allow networking and read access, and then the watch just so that the watcher gets started. So you can see that this gets started on localhost 8000. So if I open up my Insomnia here, now Insomnia has been updated recently, which is slightly kind of annoying right in the middle of the series. So if you kind of open up Insomnia, you might have like a page that looks like this. And again, this might again change. I'm just using the local scratchpad for free without logging in, and you'll see kind of this similar interface as to what we saw in the previous videos. And you can just click this and create a new HTTP request here with this button here on the left-hand side. So I'll do that. I'll create a new request. I'll rename this to, I'll say, get all, just so it's quite clear as to what that is. And I'll paste my, not users.json, I'll paste my URL right here, copy that. I'll switch over to Insomnia and I'll paste it in and I'll send that off. And we can see that we do get a 404, which is exactly what we expected because that's what our server is sending back. So at least we know that that's working, so that's quite nice. Now, if I switch back to my VS Code over here, I'll just close my terminal here so I have a bit more space. I'm going to read in this file so that I can actually send it back to the user for the different types of users, in this case, in my users.json file. Well, it's a lot of users in one word, in one sentence. So I'm going to say const, I'll say file is equal to await deno.read text file. And this is going to be users.json. I think we can specify that this is in the current folder, so I can say /, but I believe that's the default. We saw this in the kind of video before with data sources. Now, if you're wondering how I can use await outside of an async function, this is another nice feature of Deno. This is effectively all wrapped up in like a module, so we can use await outside of an async function, because at the end of the day, this is all effectively just one async function, kind of like a main function, if you can think of it that way, all wrapped up in a module anyway. So this is going to actually block and then this is going to kind of run after. So we have to be a bit careful with how we do this, as we saw in the JavaScript series as well. Now, that's going to give us our file. So we should be able to have a string, and that's going to be all this string content from here as a large string, but we want that as a JSON. So I'm going to say const, I'll just say users is equal to json.parse, and parse, we can pass it a string, which is that file. And it will give us back all of our users, which is quite nice. Now, what I can do for now is I can actually start adding a route in here. And what I can do with that route is I can say, well, if you're looking for the /users route, then I can actually just send you all these users, which is going to be quite nice. So what we can do is I'll create a const, I'll say users route is equal to a new URL pattern. We saw the URL pattern API in the routing, server-side routing video. So if you haven't seen this before, you can either check that out, or hopefully this is explanatory enough as we go through this together here. And I'm going to say I want the path name for this to be /users. Okay, notice I have a plural users here, not singular users, because I want this to kind of read nicely. I want to get all the users plural, which means multiple users. Now, I want to match that path name. So I'm going to say if, actually I'll create another variable here. I'll say const let me just line this up just so it's a bit nicer to read. I'll say const URL is equal to a new URL. I want to turn this request.url, which is going to be the URL from the requester. So for example, this URL, or if I type whatever after this, it'll be that actual URL from the client side. And that'll allow me to kind of break the URL into its requisite parts, so we can easily test it and do other things with it if we need. So if I say users route dot test, and I test it against this URL, so this is saying that the slash users route matches. So that's what that means. I guess I can put that here just so it's a bit more clear. So that means like we are in the slash users route. Then we can do something different than if we are in every other route. That's why I had this return 404 down here, because I want to make sure that we are actually inside the user's route, so we can actually return the users. Otherwise, the client might not be asking for the users. So if we are in the user's route, maybe what I'll just do for now is I'll just return a new response. And now what's interesting about this is we actually need to take the users and turn it back into a string to send it back to through the response. So I'll show you what I mean. So if I say users here, and I do status is maybe, let's say 200. Actually, 200 status is the default. So I could add status 200 and be explicit. What I really want to do was add a headers. And the headers, I can either do a headers object or I can do a regular object like this. And I can say the content type is going to be application/JSON, I believe is the one for the content type for JSON. Now, I believe the response is kind of, in this case, we're passing in users here. So I'll show you what I mean. It's actually not smart enough in this case. We'll actually get back a bunch of object representations, I believe, if we do this. So I'll show you why we need to stringify it first. But just keep in mind that this users is actually like a JavaScript object. Okay, like we're doing JSON parse on this. And if I console log this out, let me just show you what I mean. If I console log out users, what we're actually going to get is that very, very large object, which is in this case the array. Okay, the array of users. So that is not a string. So we have to be careful when we're sending this back to the client in this case. So I'll save this file and I'll kind of reload this over here. Now, I'll show you what I mean. If I switch back to Insomnia here, and if I look for localhost 8000 just by itself, I'll still get a 404. If I do user singular, I hope to get a 404, so that's still working. If I do users plural, then if I send this off, it is working. So I'm getting exactly what I expected to get back, which is what I was going to show you, which is I get back all of these kind of objects, object things, which is a little bit strange looking. Right? And the reason is we need to stringify everything before we send it down to the client, because the responses really deals with binary or string data, depending on how we actually encode it. So in this case, we need to take this user's JavaScript object and turn it into a string. So I'm going to say const users string is equal to JSON.stringify is the reverse or the inverse of JSON.parse. And if I pass the users, it'll take the users and it'll turn it back into a string. Now, technically, I could probably pass in the file, which is a string too, but maybe we do some manipulation on this users object. And I do want to make sure we're still using the users object because this might not be relevant after the first time it's loaded in. Now, I'm going to take this users string and I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste that into my response over here instead of the actual JSON object itself or JavaScript object itself. And if I save that now and I go back to Insomnia and I click send, lo and behold, we get back all of our users right down there, which is quite nice. So take a look at that. Maybe I can zoom in a tiny bit more so you can see that a little bit better. There are all of our users. There's a very large scroll bar over here. If I scroll to the very bottom, we can probably see that there's number 100, Irina, which is quite nice. So there we go. And if we look at the headers, we can see that the content type is indeed application JSON. And there's a nice content length in there, which is the length of that string effectively. It's about 12.2 kilobytes, which should match kind of what I have on my file system, I believe. So there we go. We have a user's route, and just to make sure that this is working, if I accidentally say like users 2 or put some other route that doesn't match, I'll get a 404. So the only thing that's matching through our URL pattern is a /users directly off the path name, which is quite nice. So there's a lot going on in here. So let me just kind of recap this for us, because I think it's really important to really kind of boil this down and understand what's happening. We have an entire user's JSON file. We're going to read that in as a string. We need to turn it into a JavaScript object using JSON parse. Our handler for Deno server is listening on port 8000. And if we are looking at the /users route, so if our request is requesting the /users plural, it's going to match this if statement right over here. And this if statement this if statement right here, I highlighted too much, is going to know that the user, or the client in this case, is asking for all of the users that we have. So we should return all the users. We shouldn't kind of return something else. So we're going to turn all that users back into a string and send it back as a response and let the client know that this is a JSON response with the headers over here. Okay. If any of the other routes are being asked for that are not /users right now, at least, we're sending back a 404 message down here, just so they know that that's kind of not one of the routes that we're supporting. Okay, so that's really pretty much it for getting all the like a get all style of route. This is really all it is. It's just different types of routes. So if we have /users or /posts or /comments, whatever our route or our kind of backend is working on or it's doing, if it's like a game API or if it's like a business API, whatever it happens to be, we're going to create a set of endpoints is what they're called. And each of them is going to have one of these /somethings. And we can do something different with each of them. And the ones that are usually plural like this by default, most of the time mean I'm asking for all of something. Now, I'll show you shortly how we can customize this a bit deeper, but just keep that at the back of your mind for now. Okay, great. So that's how to get all of a resource, which is quite wonderful. Now, the next thing you're probably wondering, well, what if I only want one of them, right? So let's take a look at that next. So this is how we can get a single resource. So previously, we just looked at get users, plural. Imagine if we just want a single user from our API. In this case, we would make similarly a get request, right? Because we're getting some kind of resource, in this case, a user. But we need to kind of specify a little bit of extra information to the API so it kind of knows which something we're asking for. Because if you think about it, like let's say I have like a bunch of anything, right? Like a bunch of apples, right? Like if I have a basket of apples and you come to me and you say, give me an apple, I could randomly pick an apple and give it to you. Or you could specify, hey, I would like the one that's like a little bit red, a little bit green, and it's like a little bit bigger on the top right side, for example, right? And then I'll pass you a very specific apple. But if we don't specify, then we don't really know, and maybe random is not usually something that we'd want when we talk about specifically asking for a resource. So for example, in the case of a user, what we normally have is what's called a parameter. In fact, this parameter is pretty much common for pretty much any type of resource. And most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, it's going to be some kind of ID or unique identifier for that resource. So over here, we have what looks like a get request to /user, again, singular, not plural, and then ID, which is a dynamic route indicator in this case, which we'll do together with Deno in a second. And this is saying, hey, there's going to be some kind of ID after this /, and that's going to identify that specific resource. So in practice, this would look something like this, the second line right over here. I'm saying I want the user with the ID of 3. That's what this is saying right over here, /user/3. So I'm filling in ID with the number 3, which is my ID system in this case, and that's translating to get the user with the ID of 3. Okay, so the response to this request might look like something like this, right? Over here we have Annalise, I guess, from Brazil. and Annalise is ID number 3 in this case. So that matches exactly what we requested for. Notice that we're not getting like IDs 1 and 2 or 4 or 5 or an array. We're getting back a single JSON object in this case for the user with the ID of 3, which is Annalise in this specific example. Okay. So let's take a look at how we can actually build this. So I'm going to switch back to my VS Code over here. I'll create a new file. I'll just call this get1.ts. And what I'll do is I'll actually pretty much copy everything from my get all. I'll just do Control A, Control C, just so you don't have to watch me type a bunch of stuff. And I'm going to paste it in. And I'm going to remove all of this route stuff over here. I'm just going to keep this stuff right here. Now, I normally don't like doing this, but really this is just repetitive code over here. Just to recap what this is doing, we're reading in our user's JSON file as a string. We're JSON parsing it so it's an object that we can actually do like dot syntax on and other things and searching through it. And over here, we have our async handler. I'm gonna grab the URL over here, turn it into URL object, return the 404 by default if nothing is found, and then just Deno serve this handler function right here. Okay, great. Now, the main difference here is we are going to make a URL pattern, but for /user/something. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm gonna say const user pattern. I could probably be more specific with this, but I'll just start with this for now, is equal to a new URL pattern. And this one is going to have a, I'll just do it like this, just so it's a bit more clear exactly, it doesn't run off the screen. The path name in this case is going to be /user/ and then I can do kind of this nice syntax where I can do /:, for example, and then any name that I want. In this case, I'll just do ID because that's what I'm expecting is the ID for the user path in this case. Okay. Now what we can do here again is I can say if the user pattern.test against the URL, that means that we are matching this route right here, in this case /user/something. If we match that route, then we are looking, I'll just put this up here. We are looking for a specific user ID. So for example, /user and then like 5, for example. So that's going to be quite nice. Once we're in here, what we'll do is what is going to be quite nice is for now, I'll just like return a new response. I like to do this once in a while, just a sanity check. And I'll just say, I'll just put user as a string for now. I'll just do that actually. It's just a string. It's not JSON. So content type, I think it's just going to be text by default. So if I do this, I'll restart my Deno server here. So I'll go to Deno run --watch --allow-net --allow-read. And then this is going to be get1.ts. And that's going to be opened up on port 8000 again. And now if I search for localhost 8000/users, I'll get a 404. Localhost 8000/user singular, still technically a 404 because remember our route is going to match /user/something. I can do /user/abc, which technically is something. And you'll see I will get back user 200 OK. Or I could do like 123 and I'll get OK as well, right? So we have to be a bit careful with exactly how we're parsing that, because do note that really this could be anything, right? We could have a whole bunch of random stuff over here, and that could technically be the ID that's submitted. So we have to be a bit careful to guard against that. Also, it could be out of range. So we have to watch for all these different kinds of things. But we can see that this is working, right? We get back that response, which is quite nice. Now, if I switch back here, I'll just close this terminal just so that we have a bit more space again. The way that we can actually access this ID is by grabbing it out of the match. So I'll say const match is equal to user pattern dot exec. So exec is going to call this regex pattern that's created behind the scenes on, in this case, the URL. So we're going to say I want to exec it on the URL to actually test what the match is in this case. So this is going to test this against the URL that comes in, which is this entire string. And once we have that string match, it's going to actually break it into its requisite parts, which is going to be the ID in this case, which is going to be quite nice. So we saw that in the previous videos. So just so we can see what this looks like, I'll just do a console log here, and I'll console log the match object just so we can see how that works. And I'll save that. I'll switch back to Insomnia, and I'll click send here. And then that match object, this is a little bit cut off here, but where is the match? It's a very, very, very large object, but here it is right there. So inside of match, we have a matching of the path name over here. And the path name has groups, and inside groups, we see that we have ID. So this is really nice, right? We can see that it's matching /user/123 in this case, which is the URL that I submitted, against this regex right here, which is being turned into an actual regex behind the scenes. And it's giving me the name that I asked for beside the colon here as the key. And then the value is the actual value in that spot, which is quite nice. So if I want to, instead, I can say console.log of match dot path name dot groups dot ID. Now notice that TypeScript over here added a question mark. This is saying that technically there could be no matches, so we need to be careful. So it's optionally chaining this, because if we try to do dot something on something that's null, we'd get an error, right? So it's just trying to be helpful here in this case. It's saying, hey, you didn't check that this is null. We want to do like if there's no matches, then do this kind of thing. But we'll be a bit lazier just so I can show you this for now. I'll save this. I'll restart the server. And what if I'm logging this entire thing out, what we'll see here, if I go back to my Insomnia and I send this back over and I switch back to my VS Code, we'll see 1, 2, 3. If I switch back here, if I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I send that off, switch back, you can see I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so that's quite nice. Now, let's say that now what we want to do is return the user, but with that specific ID. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Well, we have an array here. The users is an array of users, objects, right? This is an array of objects where each object is a user, and part of that user is the ID attribute. So we want to match define this ID attribute. So I'm going to say, we're going to look for, I'm going to reassign this to, I'll say const ID to look for is equal to this right here. So that's our ID to look for. Then I'll say const user or matching user is equal to, so I'm going to look through our users dot, and what we can do is, this is an array. So with an array, we know that we can use find to find the first match. So I'll say dot find, and find is going to take each value one at a time, and we can search using that value using a callback function. So for each user, I want to look through the user, and we're matching to find the first user.id is equal to ID to look for, just like that. Now, the challenge with this is that since we're using TypeScript and Deno here, we have to be a bit more careful with our type. So before I go further here, I do want to show exactly what I'm doing with the find if you haven't seen this before. So if I go back to Google here, I'll pull up Google, I'll do mdn array find. There's array.prototype.find over here. If I open that up, you can see that this is the find method of array. This is how you use it. And we want to find, for example, in this case, the element that has the first element that has a value greater than 10, in this case would be 12. If you read through this, you can see how this works. This is one of the array methods. If you need help with this, you can take a look at the JavaScript series. We go through some of the different array methods like map, filter, and reduce, for example, which are also very useful. Okay, now The challenge that we're running into here is that Deno and TypeScript don't really know what's happening here. It's saying that parameter user implicitly has type any type. Now, this can get kind of annoying. And I know what a lot of people like to do is kind of like ignore these errors or suppress the errors. However, it's trying to be quite helpful, just like very helpful over here. If I didn't have this question mark here and I assumed that match existed, then if there was no match, then that would mean that I would get an error because I would try to, it would be null dot something and then my server would crash, which would be terrible. So this is actually definitely being helpful to us. So let's see how we can actually be helpful with our users over here. So in this case, it needs to know something about each of these users. So let me come up to the very, very top of this file, maybe what I'll do. Technically, we should probably put this in a separate file, but I'll just put it all in one file just so we can all have it in one place for the sake of this video. I'll create a new interface and I'll call the interface user. And we know that each user is going to have an ID, which is a number. Each user has a first name, last name, email, country, and city, which are all strings. So I'll say first underscore name, which is a string, last underscore name, which is also a string. I already forgot the other ones. Email, country, city. Email, which is also a string. Country, which is also a string. And city, which is also a string. All right. Now, that is our kind of contract or definition of a single user in the case of our application in this case, okay? Now we have multiple users, so this is just defining one user. So I'll show you what's pretty cool about how TypeScript or Deno, I guess, helps us out here. So if I look at this users over here, you can see that it's being typed as type any, which basically means that we don't have a type for this. It could be really anything like a variable type from JavaScript. Now, we know that when we're parsing this file, we're getting back an array of users, right? Where each user is one of these. So we can tell Deno, hey Deno, or TypeScript in this case, hey TypeScript, like this is going to be an array of users where each user is one of these items. Now, some of these might be optional. If they were optional, for example, like let's say country was optional, we could do things like this. But in this case, I'll just leave it as non-optional just so that we have a very basic setup. And I can say that I want to type the users as an array of users. And the way that looks is just like this, is the colon, and then in this case, user with the array brackets after it, which is saying that this is not a single user, but this is an array of users. And if I save that, what you can see is if I come back down to users, now we can see that users is an array of users, right? So, and we can see that even user over here, a single user, is just one user, which is quite nice. That's actually pretty wonderful. Now we're actually getting an error here. So the error here is a different error. We're saying this comparison appears to be unintentional because a number and string are being combined. So actually, this is actually really helpful, right? Because what this is saying is, hey, when you grabbed the ID to look for out of the URL, that's a string. But the ID that you're matching against for the user, this ID right here, is a number. This is a number, it's not a string. So what you're actually doing here is you're comparing this number to this string, and that's a little bit dangerous. So you want to be a bit careful with that, okay? So what we can do is we can convert this into a number. So I can say number, just like that. And I can convert that into a number using the number constructor, or I can just put a unary plus beside it, whichever is easier for you, but I like this a bit more explicit. And now that error goes away because now this is a number, this is a number. We kind of run the case where we're converting null into a number, but for now, we'll just not worry too much about kind of the error edge cases, and we can have our matching user. So let's see if this even works in the first place. I will just console.log out my matching user and see what happens. So if I open up my terminal here, and I go back to Insomnia, and I search for this user, and I click send, we can see that undefined. So that makes sense. We don't have a user ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What if I search for user ID of 1? We know that that exists. So I'll click search. And take a look at that. We have Gustina. Gustina pops up, right? Which is pretty great. What if I put user ID of 2? I send that off. Okay. Now I get back Pate. Hopefully I pronounced that right. And that actually works quite well, right? So what if I say like, 24? So a random number between 1 and 100 here. I get back LSIT, right? Which is great. So that's actually working really, really nicely. So our find is actually working as we expect. Now, what we can then do is we can just simply return, I'll comment that out. I can just simply return that matching user. But remember, we need to stringify it. So I can either stringify it here, or I can stringify it like before the response. So I'll just do it here, just so you can see how that works. I'll say JSON stringify matching user. And I'll do here of headers of content type. And if those of you are wondering why I'm not capitalizing this, I'm sorry. I know that really bothers some people. Application JSON, but you can do capital C, capital T if that really bothers you. Now, that hopefully works, right? We're grabbing that user. We're going to stringify that user if we found it, and then we can send that back. So let's see what happens. So if I switch back to Insomnia and I search for 24 now, instead of user, I actually get back LSIT. If I search for number 1, I think that was Agustina, which is great, right? If I search for 100, I'll get back Irina. If I search for 1000, I'll get back 200 still, but nothing is in there because it's actually a null response. So we should probably eventually fix that and have a case where if it's undefined or it's null, we probably would want to send back like some other kind of error, maybe a 404 or something like that as well. But for now, we'll just leave it because conceptually, hopefully you can see what's going on. I'm going to again go over this really quick, just so we're all on the same page, because it's super critical to understand what's happening here, because again, this was quite a lot of code. So at the very start, I define an interface, which we're going to use later to define what it means to be a user in our application. In this case, a user has an ID that's a number, first name, last name, email, country, and city, all of which are strings. And I got this from our user object in this case, which is coming from our quote unquote database, in this case, our file system. Okay. Now, we read that file in, we turn it into JSON. The only difference here from the get all example is that now we're typing this and telling TypeScript and Deno that, hey, this is actually a specific type of data, in this case, an array of users, so that it can actually be quite helpful to us. So for example, if I can say users at 0, I can say dot, and you can see I can get all the nice autocomplete of the stuff inside of that user, because Deno knows that this is a user object. Okay, so that's pretty nice. Now, we have our handler here. We have a new path name, which is matching anything that's /user/something, in this case, an ID. Our danger is that we have to make sure that this is really a number and not a string and matches all the parameters that we have. But that's kind of an exercise for future videos and for yourself even, just to test how you would kind of do some error handling on the type of ID being passed. But assuming that we have an ID like user/5, for example, we would come inside of this if statement right here, and we would look up that ID from the URL. So we're asking, in this case, the URL pattern matcher to give us the matching ID from the path name for that regex. Okay, and we're going to use that ID to look up that user in our array of users using the array find method. And we're going to ask, is this ID match this ID? So it's going to go through this array one at a time until it hits the first match of the ID, and it's going to give that back to us inside matching user. We can then stringify that, send it back to the user, and give them that JSON back as a response, which is quite nice. So that's a lot of work. But effectively, this kind of pattern, no pun intended, of kind of looking something up inside of our data after matching on a route and potentially doing some error handling or some other things in there, which I'll show you shortly, is exactly how it works for any type of resource. Both this get all method and this get one method that we just looked at together are going to be the same for every type of resource. This is all that it is. We're either asking for multiple things, like in the case of we get all, where we're getting back all of the users, and we can optionally kind of narrow that down a little bit, which I'll show you shortly, or we're getting one user. Okay, we can do things like get all the posts or get one post, get all the kind of cars or get one car, get all the products, get one product, get all the comments, get one comment, right? So this pattern works for everything, which is pretty beautiful. And that's actually the beauty of actually a REST API in general. Okay, so let's take a look at what I was hinting at earlier about narrowing these results slightly if we need to. So if we need to add extra information to our GET request, to that URL, because keep in mind, this URL is all the data that the server has to kind of figure out what our question is. Okay, so if you think about this URL, the server is going to just have this string and needs to figure out what our question is. In this case, our question is, give me all the users. That's not really a question, it's more of a demand, but that's kind of what we're asking for. Right? And in this case, we're saying, give me the user with ID of 3. Okay. Now, what if we want it to be a bit more granular, a bit more specific with kind of what we're asking for? Well, that's where request query or search parameters comes in. I kind of put a slash in there because they're kind of called different things depending on who you talk to, and both are kind of the same thing. So the main difference here is the part in green. So in this example, we're saying, I would like to get all the users, plural. Now notice that users is going to be a list of 100 different users, or potentially 1,000 or 1,000,000 users. Generally, we wouldn't want that, right? We might want to do something like filter it or paginate it or sort it in a particular order. We want to add some extra information to the server to be like, hey, can you give me all the users that maybe start their name with the letter like capital V, for example, right? Maybe that's my question. The way that you would do that is exactly through this system of search parameters. So we would add these search parameters to the end of our URL after a question mark. So after the question mark, which you can see over here in the green section, we can have key value pairs. So we can have something equals something, and we can have multiple of these stringed together, separated by the ampersand symbol, which is this symbol right here, the and symbol. So for example, down here is an actual concrete example. I can say, I want all the users, right? We're asking for all the users, but I want you to know that this is only for the country of Italy. Okay, so maybe this is like a filtering keyword, for example. So the server will take this and interpret it. Now we can build this however we want, but maybe if this is a filter, for example, we can say, okay, well, the client is asking for all of the users that we have, but all their countries need to match them being in Italy, and then we can return that subset of the users. And you can imagine that we can narrow this down further and further, right? We could say country is Italy and city is, like Rome, for example, right? So you can really go full ham with these kinds of filters, but this is really, really useful for all sorts of things. As I mentioned earlier, you can use this for not only filtering, but things like pagination. So for example, I say, maybe if I have 1,000,000 users, I only want the first 20 users, or I want users 800 to 850, that slice of users, right? These are all different things that we can do with things like search parameters. We can even do things like sorting. I can say I want the sorting to be ascending or descending, and I can have crazy like multi-sorted on multiple sorts and stuff like that. It can get quite gnarly pretty quickly. But really at the end of the day, it's really just search parameters mixed with the actual URL structure itself. Now, the nice thing about this is that the URL API actually works with this. So we have something in JavaScript called the URL search params API. Let me show you that really quick. So if I go to MDN URL search params, which is this one right here, if you go to the MDN developer network website, you can see on their documentation that this is an actual object in JavaScript, and there's a whole bunch of nice examples of how this works. But really what this is it separates out the key value pairs for us and gives us a nice API to actually get stuff out of those. So we can get the values out of those, we can leap over them, we can change them, we can sort them. There's all sorts of really nice things that we can do, and we can just pass this in directly from our URL, which is quite nice. So I'll show you what I mean in a second, but I think it's important to kind of just mention that this is actually built in to the kind of JavaScript ecosystem as a web standard, which is quite nice. So I'd like to actually add this idea to our example. I know this video is getting a little bit long, but it's really important to actually show how this works at a high level, just so you can see with one specific example, and I'll leave the rest to the actual exercises. So if I switch back to my VS Code over here, so I'm going to create a new file here for this. I'll do filter, I guess all.ts is what we'll do. I'm going to close my terminal from my previous one over here because we're going to be using a new file. I know I said I don't like doing this too much, but I'm actually going to copy all my code from the getAll.ts file. This is one where we got all the users, because we're going to be doing something very similar just with filtering here. I'm going to Control A, Control C, Control V into my filter all and save that. I'll switch back to my terminal here. I'll do Deno run --allow -net -allow -read -watch. I always forget which ones it is. And this is going to be filter all.ts. Great. So that's up and running. Now, what I want to show you is that we can actually add a query parameter or a search parameter to our question and actually get a different result. So what I mean is, imagine that I actually want to replicate this example here. I want to search for all the users, but maybe from a specific country. I want to enable that functionality to my API. So how would I do that? Well, I will have to switch this back to users, but we know that query parameters or search parameters come after a question. Now, these are all going to be key value pairs. So I could say like city equals, Rome, and then I can do a ampersand to separate these, and I can say like country equals Italy, for example. Right? Now I'm going to just do one at a time, just keep things simple. So I'm just going to do country equals Italy just to match what I have on the slides. But you can test this out with a different country or even multiple of these and see how they actually work. So if I send this off, we will get back, in this case, all of our users, right? Because that is kind of matching our user's route, because this search parameter actually does not interfere with the path name, because this is a valid /users is the route that we're asking for. So query parameter does not interfere, or search parameters do not interfere with the fact that we're asking for all the users. Okay, so that's a really key point to start with. But notice that it's not being sorted by Italy. We're getting someone from Brazil, someone from Mexico and China. So it's not being sorted by Italy because we didn't add the logic for that. So how do we actually go about that? Well, that information is actually inside the URL. Which is quite nice. So let me actually just log out this URL right down here. I'm going to say console.log this URL. Remember, this is the URL object because we're passing it into this URL constructor. So if I open up my terminal over here and I remake this query over here, I'll send that off again. And I switch back here. Hopefully you can kind of see this. Let me just make it a little bit easier to see. There you go. You can see that we actually have a search section of this URL at the very end. So what we can do with this is we can take this search and actually turn it into search params. So this is actually nicely built in. It's a little bit hidden, but it's built in. And I'll show you how we can actually access that. So if I do URL.search, we can see that there's search in there, which is this string right there, but there's also search params. Let me see if we log this out. This is going to be a URL search params object, which is what I was showing you earlier. If I switch back to my Insomnia and I send this off, and I go back over here, you can see that there's quite a lot of stuff in here. Most of these are symbols and things like that, which we saw in the JavaScript series, but this is really not meant to be looked at like this. This is meant to be kind of iterated over or using the methods inside of here as an object. So we're going to use this URL search params to actually pull out that search parameter. So I'll show you what I mean. I'll just close this over here. I'll just close this terminal just so we can take a quick look over here. I can say users route.test. So if I'm inside this users route, what I can do is I can say const search params is equal to URL.search params. And then I can do .get. And I can either get all of them or I can get a single parameter. And the way that this works, I'll show you this. If I switch back over here to URL search params and MDN, you can see that there's multiple methods to do this. We can loop through them. We can do get to get a specific search parameter. We can get all to get all of the search parameter. And this is going to get all the values. Now, There's different things that we would kind of use these different methods for. But let's say that for now, all I'm interested in for this particular demo is to show how we can actually accomplish this, which is a country of Italy. Okay, so I want to look for the country search parameter, and I want its value. Okay, I want the value for the country search key, which is going to be some country like Canada or Italy or Mexico or something like that, right? So the way that we do that, if I'll switch back here, I'll say I want to get the country, make sure you spell it right, the country search parameter. Now let me log this out. I'll do console.log search params, and I'll save this. And I'll open my terminal again over here, and I'll go back to Insomnia, and I'll send this off again with the question mark country equals Italy. I'll go back to my terminal, and look at that, we have Italy, right? Which is quite nice, and that's being pulled out of that URL search parameter, which is pretty beautiful. If I switch back to Insomnia and I change this, let's just say I say Mexico, and I do send. What I'll have over here is I'll have Mexico, which is pretty nice. So that works really nicely, right? So that gives us the value for the key of country in that search parameters kind of object that gets parsed. Now, what we kind of would want to do, I'll just comment this out for now. What we'd want to do is we'd want to find all the users that match that country. Now, I'll do this kind of the lazy way and the easy way, just so you can see how you go about this. Frankly, probably how I would probably do this really quickly in general. I'll just say const, I'll say filtered users is equal to an array. And what I'll do is I'll say for const user of my users. If the user dot, and this will help a lot if I type this here. So if I actually brought over my typing from my other file, you'll see what I mean. So if I say if user dot country is equal to my search, what is it? Search, I guess technically it should not be search params. This is going to be country param. I should probably rename this country param. Like that, and I'll probably change it over here, just like that. If it's equal to country parameter, then I want to do filtered users dot push, and I want to push the that particular user. Okay. Now, what we can do then is we'll have a list of users. So we're going to loop through every single user in here, find the ones that have a matching country, and we'll have our filtered users. And we can then return that response. Now, the challenge here is what if our user doesn't have a query parameter, right? What if they're not looking for anything as a country and they're just searching just for users? Well, maybe we should actually test to see if they're actually doing this. So we'll say if country param is, I guess technically get is going to return either a string or it's going to return null if it doesn't find anything. So if country param is equal to null, or we can say if there's no country param, but if I'll say country param is equal to null, I'll be very explicit. Then I want to kind of do all this stuff. And I'll move that over here inside here. Or this should be not equal to null. Sorry. If it is equal to null, then we want to do this stuff over here. Then what we want to do over here is we want to return a new response of the JSON.stringify of our filtered users. And we want our headers. Why am I getting, putting this in JSON stringify here. I'm getting really, really confused as to all my brackets. You can see over here, commas over there, then the brackets. And then our headers is going to be content type. I'll show you the full thing in a second. I know this is covering it, application/JSON. There we go. So I'll just save this so it reformats nicely and we can see how this works. So we're saying if there is a country parameter, which means that if we didn't find nothing there, then that means we are searching for a country filter. Then we want to filter by users by country, just like this. Now, it can get quite complex if you have multiple filters, as you can imagine. We'd have to have multiple conditionals and kind of test for different types of conditions. But this is exactly the process how we would actually go about doing this. This right here is quite a complex route, and I'll show you exactly how this works in a second, but let me just test that it actually works really quick before I actually test that it works. So I haven't tested it myself yet. So we switch back here. I'll say users, country equals Mexico. I'll send that off. And lo and behold, we do get Ellie over here from Mexico, Gregor from Mexico, and Connie. And if I search for, let's do Italy, I wonder how many are there. In Italy, we only have Gustiana, I guess. Gustina. Maybe I'll do Canada. I wonder if we have any in there. And we do. We have two. We have Haywood and Karen. So that's good. So that works quite nicely. So our filter is actually working. And if I get rid of this filter here for a second, just so we can actually see that our other response actually still works, and I send that off, you'll see that we actually do get all 100 users still because we're not going into that if statement. So the way that this is working, this is the most complex example I want to show you, and this is quite a long video, but it's really hopefully worth it for you to see all of these things kind of pulled together. Ideally, we'd have the interface at the top here like we did for the get one section. But what we're doing is we're checking for the matching the /users plural route. Now, in this particular example, we can do two things. We can either have a filter, right? So we can either have no filter like this, or we can have our filter like this. Right? So if we have no filter, then that means that we're going to have none of this. This is not going to match, and we're going to return our users string directly, which is all the users. Right? If we return a 404, if we're not looking for users at all, otherwise we return all the users if we're just looking for /users. If there is a country parameter, country filter, that is supported by our API. As we can see, we just coded it together. We're going to search for all of the users that match that country by checking to see if that country parameter exists and what that value is. And then we can kind of do some logic to actually fill up an array with those values. Now, there's many ways to do this. This is just one example using a couple loops, but hopefully you can actually see how that works. Now, to wrap up this video, I just want to go over a few few things at the end, plus some design ideas. Now, there's this idea of nested resources that's really important to keep in mind as well, because sometimes, or actually most of the time, it's not as simple to split up our data model into just /something and then another /something, another /something. Eventually, we're going to have things that are related to each other. So, for example, imagine that we have some kind of platform, like say it's YouTube, like you're watching right now, and we want to grab all the comments for a video, or in this case, it's a social media platform, and there's a post and there's a bunch of comments for that post, right? And we could maybe ask a question that looks like this. We could say kind of a nested resource. We could say we want a post with this ID and all the comments for that post with that post ID. Right? So in this case, get all the comments for a post with an ID of 42 if it looks like this. Now, the key thing to keep in mind here is this needs to be kind of a hierarchical structure. A post needs to have comments, and it needs to make sense that comments go with posts. Right? This doesn't make sense for things that are unrelated to each other. You want to really keep this type of structure strictly relegated to things that are directly related and in our hierarchical structure. So for example, a library has many books, right? A post can have many comments. Like a car dealership can have like many cars, for example, or products, right? A store has many products. It really depends how you structure it, which is the next kind of slide I'm going to get into. You don't want to be too vague, but you also can get in danger of being too specific. And there's definitely a bit of an art to this as well. So definitely to keep something in mind here, and also keep in mind that you can keep query and search parameters here as well with the question mark at the end, as well as multiple things separated by an ampersand. Now this comes back to the final thing I want to mention, which is this idea of REST API design. And I've been hinting at this a little bit throughout the video, and I want to end with this because it's really important. There is no one set way to create these REST API routes. Okay, as you can see over here, I'm clicking all over the place here, but it make you dizzy. As you can see over here, right, this is just one possible design. Maybe this doesn't make sense in other contexts. So the design really is related to the specific application and kind of business area or product area that you're in. So you need to be very kind of cognizant of that fact and design your API and your paths explicitly with that in mind and with support for all these other features that we mentioned earlier. So keep in mind that the route paths, the API paths, are usually nouns, and you can think of them as plural and singular, right? So things like user and users, posts and posts, right? So always try to think that the verb is the request method. So get, and then post and put, patch, and delete, which you'll see later. And then the noun is the actual resource itself, like person or people or users or user. Most of these APIs are JSON APIs, but you can see some of these REST APIs actually return HTML and templated HTML directly. So it really depends on the type of kind of team that you're on and what kind of product you're building. But you really want to be careful with that logical nesting of the endpoints, which is this idea right here. If you are nesting things, make sure it makes sense in a hierarchical structure and you're not just mixing and matching things. If you have to add a new requirement where you have to kind of match two different things together, but they're not related, you have to think of another solution, like maybe a different type of endpoint that's more generic that allows for different types of searching, or maybe an entirely different thing altogether. Now, one nice thing to do is always you should kind of allow for things like filtering, pagination, nesting, sorting. As you saw with our example when we just created users with the filtering on the country, that is a very useful thing to do. Usually we don't want to return all of something, especially if there's thousands or millions of those things. You want to add some kind of limitation, because if you're getting millions of things at a time, not only is that a lot of data back and forth, but it's going to be very slow and it's going to slow down your database and your server quite a lot. So you have to have some limitations in there. So definitely make sure you allow for those ideas. What we didn't do in this video too much is handle errors gracefully. So you want to make sure that if there is no response from the database, or you're not getting the data, or things are null or undefined, you're actually handling those errors correctly and sending back the correct status code. So if it's not found, then it's not found. If you're not authenticated, which we'll see in later videos, that is a different issue. Now, a lot of this is try-catch blocks. A lot of this is just making sure you're using if statements correctly to actually guard against situations where things are null. So it really depends on how your kind of data is structured and what you're actually searching for. But the client should also be aware of these errors. So you should actually send back an error to the client saying, hey, something went wrong. This is potentially what went wrong. Or maybe do at least some logging of that. So the client at least is aware of what's happening, but you shouldn't be giving away too much information about the internal workings of your server as well. So it's a bit of a delicate trade-off. The other thing that's really important is you should document the API as you're designing it and building it, because inevitably it does change over time as more requirements get added. And you do want to keep it updated with ample examples, both for others and for yourself, so you know exactly how to use it and others know how you might use it, right? If you think about MDN is so useful because of, look at all these examples, right? Look at all these nice examples for every single type of, in this case, the different web APIs and the things like the URL search parameters or the array API, all the JavaScript APIs are all in there. And that we use that a lot and we really rely on it. Every time something changes, they have to come and update these. Otherwise, it becomes not updated and quite stale, and we can't rely on that data being accurate. So the same is true for any team that you work on with these APIs. Now, there's many more of these things. In fact, we could probably create a whole separate series on API design specifically. But at the end of the day, it really does come down to both some practice and experience, some kind of trade-offs and best practices, which we're doing together in this series. But really, at the end of the day, it does also come down to the actual business use case that you are building and the use cases for the teams that are actually going to be using that API. For example, is it an internal API only? Is it for a public-facing client-side API? Is it for only a web device? Is it for different types of devices? It really depends on what type of API you're building, and that's how you're going to design it, is for that specific use case for the most part. Now, that's all I had for this video. I hope you found that valuable and useful and interesting. If you did, I'd love it if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'd love to hear in the comments below what you thought of this. Have you seen the GET API or GET request methods and an API explained in this way before? Have you struggled with any of these concepts? Does this make sense? Does any of it not make sense? Do you have any questions about this stuff? I'd love to know. If you like this content, I'd love it if you could also support the channel. I have a Patreon set up in the description below, as well as the YouTube memberships and super thanks if you want to contribute that way. What we're going to do in the next video together is go through some exercises together to get more practice with this idea of GET requests and the REST API. So we can do things like get a single resource, filter a resource, get multiple resources, go through some examples of that together before we get to the next topic, which is actually finally getting to create resources on the server and actually write to the file system, write to the database, and actually add to that set of content. I can't wait to get to those exercises. I will see you over there.